Joining us, MS Now political analyst, Democratic strategist, and former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party, Basil Smikle, deputy editor for The Villager, a small-town newspaper in Maine, Alex Seitz-Wald, because we're going to talk about Graham Plattner. Stu Stevens, you're still with us. I keep saying goodbye, and you keep on coming back, which is great. I'm happy to continue seeing you. Let's talk broadly for a second, because when the Democratic Party is arguing over how to sell the affordability message, what is the core of that argument?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why there's an argument around this, because the affordability message has worked everywhere that candidates have tried it. They've been very disciplined in the message. And one thing that, in the past we probably shied away from, which was nationalizing races. Nationalizing races right now is actually also a good winning strategy. But you have to make the clear contrast. And I think Democratic voters are much more attuned to that clearer contrast. So maybe there is some attempt to kind of muddle the ground a little bit by not drawing that contrast, or by, maybe not trying to challenge the administration too much. But that's not going to work in this new.
Does it have to be a uniform message, too? Can't it just be to each candidate your own message? I mean, tailor make it to who you're trying to talk to?
Yes, that's exactly right. I challenge this premise that Democrats can't win just by being anti-Trump. Donald Trump's the first presidential candidate who never ran a single positive commercial. And I think you can make a good case that the Harris campaign would have been better off if they had done close to that. Look, I think Democrats need an agenda in the way like strip clubs need buffets. It's sort of expected and you need to have it, but don't kid yourself. This is why you're getting customers. I mean, people are going to be voting because they are angry at the status quo. And you just have to put a very simple dynamic out there. If you like the way that things are going, great. You've got a choice. Vote for the people, these Republicans who are in power. They control all the government. If you think that we can do better, here's an alternative. And don't try to resell the Democratic Party or rebrand it. You're exactly right that these individual candidates can articulate their own messages, and they'll be the best ones to do that. And I think that's how you make it easiest to win. You don't make some big speed bump that you got to buy another agenda.
I'm sorry. Are there buffets at strip clubs?
Well, yeah, I've read that.
Yeah, I've read that. I've read that too. I heard that somewhere.
Okay, I'm gonna get us back on the rails here. Alex, we're obviously talking in broad terms about what Graham Plattner is doing, because there's a kind of a fit in the party over his candidacy, whether he's a good idea as a candidate. He's had a lot of notable drawbacks that he's so far been able to overcome, it seems, with Maine primary voters. The polling that we talked to you about just a few weeks ago was insane. The lead he had over Janet Mills was, what was it, like 50 points? It was something ridiculous. Seems like, I guess that must have matched her own internal polling, because she dropped out. Is Graham Plattner's candidacy in Maine viable for the general?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the big question now.
Alex, you're on mute. Unmute yourself.
Well, can you hear me now? We are obviously going to have...
it's my earpiece. My bad. Go ahead.
I was just saying, that's obviously the big question. We're going to see all of these attacks that I think Democratic primary voters were very familiar with: the tattoo, the Reddit posts. Janet Mills ran ads on those. How will those play with independents, Republicans, soft moderates? Because the swing voters in Maine are not the white male working class voters who used to be union members that you might think of in the Rust Belt. It's really educated women, older women on the coast who have voted for Susan Collins in the past because they find her reasonable, even though they might vote for a Democrat in the presidential election. So I'm really curious to see how Plattner plays there. And Republicans are very much going to prosecute the case that he's not viable. But to the point that you guys were just arguing about, I think one thing, there's many lessons that we can take away from this campaign, but one of them is I think campaigns in this day and age need to be interesting. And Graham Plattner was just more interesting than Janet Mills, because you're not just competing against your opponent, but you're competing against Netflix and Peacock and social media apps. It's the attention economy. And so I think Plattner will continue to be interesting, for better or worse. And Trump has showed us that even negative, very bad headlines, if people are talking about you, you can keep winning.
Yeah, I mean, that is not a bad point. Mamdani here in New York supports that as well.
Absolutely right. Look, Democrats largely win when you have an outsider candidate, especially one that attracts the ire of Donald Trump and Republicans, because then that becomes a very important sort of attack that Democrats can use against that, authoritarian regime, if you will. So I do think that Democrats win when they're outsized candidates. But let me just go back to something very quickly that Stu said, because I listened to him when he was on earlier, and he did say something about making sure that Democrats in the next go-round hold Republicans accountable.
Yeah, so that's top of the show.
Right, and that's why I think it is important that Democrats run with an agenda. They have to create a world that voters want to be a part of. And creating that world and talking about what Democrats are going to do, you don't have to be chapter and verse, but you have to be very disciplined in saying that the crony capitalism that you've been watching, all of the corruption that you don't like, people are getting rich off of that. What's happening to you? They have to be able to monetize and really be concrete about what they've lost and start talking about what voters can gain if Democrats take power. That's a multi-year strategy, by the way. That's just not this year, but it's this year going into 2020.
Yeah, especially, Alex, when so many voters say that they don't like either party. They don't like politics at all, that no matter who they vote for, nothing changes. Do you get the sense from voters out there that it has to go beyond Donald Trump is bad?
I do, and that was really Janet Mills' whole campaign. It was built around this viral moment she had at the White House, the "I'll see you in court" moment, and it was all about being tough, being a fighter. Themes that I think are very familiar to anyone who has followed politics, especially for women candidates. I covered the Hillary Clinton campaign. Those were big themes and messages. I do think politics has moved on a little bit. And even though she's been governor for 2 terms, she was attorney general for 2 terms, she kind of assumed that people understood what she had done and accomplished, and instead of really making that case herself. Susan Collins, meanwhile, not a big public figure, not a compelling speaker, but is just absolutely open the spigots in Maine. She's the chair of the Appropriations Committee. You can go on her website, and there's a map of all the projects she's funded, and it is just absolutely filled. Everything from a little historic society in our coverage area, a bridge on the street that I used to live on. These are all projects that would need to be funded from local property tax dollars instead. So I do think that kind of thing goes a long way. And she talks about that constantly. The one thing that you can hear Susan Collins talking about a lot is the projects that she's funded, the firefighters, the police unions. That's every ad on TV is about. So I think you have to make a proactive case. And what I think Collins is doing there is saying, hey, even if you don't like Donald Trump, even if you're not a Republican, I'm delivering for the state of Maine. I have seniority. You know me. You can trust me. This new guy who no one had ever heard of 2 seconds ago, who knows what else is in his background, stick with me and I'll be safe. And that's how she's going to try to overcome this anti-establishment wave if it shapes up to be that way. But, it's a tough order. But if anybody can do it, Susan Collins might be the one to do it.
Listen, I think that's why it's so important to have reporters in the places that we're covering come talk to us, like in Maine, because on a national level, we're not talking about that sort of thing. We're talking about Susan Collins' national votes, the way she's pushed back against Donald Trump, not necessarily the individual experience of Mainers who look at what she says she's done for them and then can use that as they go into the voting booth. Stu, what do you think of that?
Oh, I think I was very smart. I think he's absolutely right. When I ran campaigns, I ran Thad Cochran's last campaign. He was running against a primary opponent. He said that Cochran was someone who had blown up the budget and created this deficit. And we basically said, yeah, you're right. And look where this money went. Here's this school. Here's this bridge. Here's this road. I think, look, what Plattner has to do is just say, you get that with me, but you're going to get more. And this attention economy phrase is such a great one because Susan Collins is sort of an invisible figure, except when she emerges every now and again to say that she's concerned.